Since we're together, I want to start with a couple minutes on the employment report, which will come out either later today or tomorrow. But it's very interesting for a couple reasons. I just wanted to give everybody a little bit of a preview. The federal government, as you know, revises their numbers. There was a dramatic revision, a couple of them, in Indiana's numbers. For 2011, they had initially reported that the state added 27,000 jobs, private sector jobs. It turned out they missed by 60%. It was 43,000. So we outperformed the country significantly. In the month of December, at 2% of the nation's population, we added 5% of the nation's new jobs. I'm sorry, it's January, excuse me. So this is good news, and it is a lot more consistent with what we thought we saw anyway in the Indiana economy and also in the revenue to state government, which has been reasonably strong. Since the worst of the recession, Indiana has added 5%, in the nation more like 3%. So it's not nearly good enough, but it's much better than what had been reported and much better than what is going on as a national average. There's one other thing that's been very interesting to me, and I take it as very good news. The Indiana workforce, the number of people working or actively looking for work, is as big as it was before the bubble burst in '07. They call it the peak. That is true almost nowhere else. And as you've probably noticed, nationwide, the number of people in the workforce has gone down by several million. It was reported last week that if the same number of people were looking for work nationally as before the recession, unemployment would be about 11% right now. So we take this as a sign of the work ethic of Hoosiers. They want to work. They're looking for work. I think it's also a sign of some optimism. They see enough activity to encourage those who are not already employed to get out and look. Now, on the legislature that we just finished, I just want to say thanks to all those who participated in another important session for Indiana. I'm going to highlight full-day kindergarten. This has been an 8-year endeavor of this administration. In 2006, about 1 in 7 5-year-olds had access to full-day kindergarten. It's now 6 out of 7, and it'll soon be universally available in our state. This is a direct result of fiscal caution and putting Indiana in a stronger fiscal condition than other places. This is an $80 million a year addition to the budget. We'll be spending $160 million more or less to make sure that full-day kindergarten is available in every district in Indiana. And so it's been a long march over these last few years, but we are really pleased and excited that we were able to do this. We're doing this at a time when education is still being cut in state after state around the country. Right to work was a very important achievement. We've already signed new agreements with 3 companies, 1 announced and 2 to come soon. There are 31 companies as of Friday night now on our negotiation rolls who have identified right to work as a major, if not the major factor in their interest in Indiana. I probably underestimated how important an addition to our already excellent business climate this was going to be. Lastly, I'm pleased with the compromises that occurred around the automatic tax refund. The tax refund remains a part of Indiana law. The threshold for future refunds, not the one we believe will happen in this tax year, but future refunds, was raised to 12.5%, and I'm fine with that. It's being even more careful to make sure we have enough money set aside for some future downturn or urgent need. But it preserves the principle that past some point of security, the money belongs to the taxpayer, not to the politicians. And we'll have to see, but with 3 months to go, based on keeping spending levels somewhat below budget and revenues holding up better than the budgeted numbers had forecast. I believe the guesstimates about the size of the refund for 2012 are on the low end of the range. That is to say, $100 on a joint return, which is 2/3 of the taxpayers, $50 for the 1/3 who file singly. That's probably very conservative, probably going to be something above that. And 3.3 million, more or less, Hoosiers, therefore, will see that bit of tax relief as a direct consequence of the General Assembly and this administration being careful with how dollars were managed. A lot of other good things happened. Happy about a smoking ban, happy about more compensation for the state affair victims' families, and very happy, by the way, at the phase out of the inheritance tax in Indiana. This will be another important step forward toward more jobs in the future. It has driven a lot of people. It has driven a lot of investment out of this state. And it has made life very difficult on a lot of family-owned businesses and family-owned farms in the past, some of whom were forced to sell just to pay the taxes. And so that was not one of my proposals, why I leave it to last, but as soon as it became clear that it might be possible, I was enthusiastic, and I think the gradual phase-out approach they took is a responsible one. That's my story.
So you mentioned that the inheritance tax wasn't on yours. A couple others of these I didn't remember being part of your agenda, like the school day kindergarten money.
Nikki, that's been part of my agenda since the State of the Union speech of 2006. As soon as we got the books of the state balanced, way back then, I started talking about it. We've put money into it, as you know, steadily. That's how we went from 10,000 kids to 67,000 kids, but that still left another 10,000 or more to go. So I consider it one of the most satisfying of the achievements that we've had.
If that's one of the most satisfying and the other things are clear wins, is local government reform, how big a disappointment is it that there's still so much resistance?
Sure, that's right. You know, we've gotten about 1/3 of the Kernan and Shepard recommendations enacted. And I think the two this year, conflict of interest and nepotism, are both very important. Some of the others were too. I mean, clearly, moving the funding of child welfare to the state was a very big and very, I think, significant change. But no, I continue to be disappointed. We couldn't have gotten more than 1/3 done. I will point out that quite separately, reform is coming to Indiana, and property tax caps are one reason why. I saw it on my most recent trip last week out in the state. We lowered property taxes and capped them mainly as a protection of homeowners and senior citizens and as an improvement in the business climate. But it is having the effect, many places I go, of leading people to start looking at the kind of consolidation of back office and administrative costs that Kernan and Shepard spoke to.
Is the smoking ban as strong as you would hope it would be?
I'll just say I would have hesitated to hope for anything more. We'd never even gotten half this far before. I'd say, maybe you could say we'd only ever gotten half this far before. And so, without knowing what it might take and what compromises would be part of it, I always knew that if we were going to pass anything at all, it was going to have some exceptions. I think I really commend those, Charlie Brown, who's worked on it for so many years, and all those that joined together, I think should feel that they did as much as anyone could have expected. Can I make one other general point? I probably should have before. I would just ask you to reflect on the fact that controversy, always more newsworthy, and partisan differences will always be with us, but I'd ask you to reflect on the fact that most of the items I just talked about were very bipartisan. The smoking ban could only have passed with the votes of lots of people in both parties, and the same is true for Really, all the other items, maybe except one or two. Sorry.
When you look at the way session worked out, some things lawmakers did, whether it was, right to work or education reform or taxpayer refund, toward the end it seemed we got caught up in Girl Scouts and license plates and some other things. Do you think lawmakers maybe went a little bit too long? They should just sort of cut it off early?
Well, they did cut it off early. Taxpayers should be happy they're finishing several days ahead of schedule. My own viewpoint is that these other items with which some folks got all infatuated and spent a lot of time and spilled a lot of ink were always sideshows. Some big things were going on in this General Assembly, and those are the things I think that will be and ought to be remembered longest. They're the things that will have a real effect.
Did you talk to any of the lawmakers about some of their crazy bills to try and
Sure.
keep them down to it?
Well, I'll leave the adjectives to you, Dan, but I had lots of talks with people about some of these, I'll say, side issues. And you saw them one by one return to the sidelines. But, I mean, I understand, we all do, why things that are a little quirky or unusual get a lot of attention. But that's fine. But it shouldn't, as we look back now on the session, it shouldn't be allowed to dominate, because those things came and went, and full-day kindergarten, the tax refund, right to work, these things will be major facts of life in Indiana for a long time.
Looking back over the whole 8 years, or 8 sessions, what's the most frustrating thing that you didn't get done?
Norm, let me answer it this way. There were things that I would love to have achieved. For instance, the big infusion to higher ed that we had an idea about involving the lottery a few years ago. I'd like to have found a way to do that. Higher ed is so important to our state's future, both strengthening it and reforming it. But let me answer you this way. There will always be important work ahead for Indiana. And I hope that these 8 years have established a new expectation that not just once a decade or once in a while, but that every single year Indiana will hunt big game, that we will look to do important, significant things. And I believe that can be said of the last 8 years, including number 8, when folks are supposed to be completely out of gas and out of energy. And so I hope there will always be something that bothers us, something that excites us about how we can build a bigger state. And I won't have a 2013 agenda, but I hope somebody's working on a big one.
Governor, stage inspections weren't on your agenda,
Right.
but lawmakers got that done. Your reaction to that?
Fine. It's just fine. My view is that we shouldn't be dealing with temporary outdoor stages, at least at the state fair anymore anyway. We're working on a way to see that the Coliseum becomes the venue for those big shows in the future. No, I think that's absolutely fine, and glad they did it.
Is there any concern on your part about the loss of revenue that comes with the inheritance tax phase out?
No, I think that it's the gradual nature of the phase out, the strong position the state is in, and we believe will continue to be in for the next couple years. I think it's very responsible. Now at least people can begin planning on it. No, this was as always, fiscal integrity was a big concern, even of the proponents of it, and that's why they opted for the glide path that they did.
What do you think should be done with license plates, especially license plates?
I don't know, and I don't care. Early on, we were concerned about the proliferation of them, but as part of the overhaul of the BMV, one of 100 changes that folks came up with was a way in which the state no longer lost money on them, and it was not nearly the administrative hassle that it was initially. So since then, it hasn't. Whatever the legislature wants is fine with us. Whether it's very few or unlimited number, we have a system that is efficient and pays for itself, or maybe even a little bit more, and so we can live, as an administration, we can live with any regime they want.
Do you feel like that was a fight that needed to be taken up in the last few weeks of the session?
Well, it's like a couple of the other flare-ups that were asked about. Had it gotten in the way of real business, I would have, at any of them, gotten in the way of real business, yes, that would be a concern. None of them did. They stirred up a lot of discussion, and that's perfectly expected and normal. But since none of them really impeded the big work of the session, in the end, I think it's just fine.
No issue there, though, that the administration may have to weigh in on. There were, Senator Long was raising concerns that the Indiana Youth Group had violated their contract by putting out something that says thank yous to donors. And I wondered if that is an issue you've looked into, and are they noticed at play?
No, I heard that notion. We don't have any complaint on that yet. If BMV gets a complaint about anybody and violating any contract, they ought to look at it. We believe in enforcing contracts we make, but whether it holds true here or not, I don't know.
Governor, this morning, one of the stories we're covering is the school bus crash with a child who was killed. Has it ever been brought up to mandate seatbelts on school buses, or is that something to look into?
It may be. Certainly I've heard the subject raised before, and you know, you can't be too safe where little ones are involved, so it may well be.
Have you identified any possible solutions to the carbon motors deal? Are you actively working with them on that?
We will if the company sees a way forward. We did as much as we knew how in this case to bring that company here, and it's a very unfortunate situation. I said the other day, more proof of the old adage, you climb in bed with the federal government, you get a lot more than a good night's sleep. And here, as other companies are finding, by the way, the federal government changes a marketplace when it extends huge subsidies out there, and they induced or seduced businesses to spend years chasing them, walked them around down the primrose path, and then cut them off. And it's you know, what we'll always wonder in a case of Carbon, Bright, and other companies is if they'd never messed with the federal government at all, might they have found a way to finance that business and get it up and running. But they blew a lot of time, and you saw how incredibly angry and frustrated both those companies were at the way the federal government treated them.
I'm sorry to ask about a Fort Wayne bill, but the legislature passed a bill that changed a law about where car dealers can move. It's an argument between two car dealerships up there. Just wondered what you thought about them changing a law after a lawsuit has been filed to intervene. Do you think that's appropriate?
I'm sorry to say I don't know this issue. You know, generally that's not good practice. And generally the legislature is very careful about that very principle. Now, whether it applies here or how it applies, I don't know. I'm sorry. We'll look at it, Nikki, and we'll get you an answer.
The legislature is now entirely in the rearview mirror. So for the remainder of your tenure as governor, what will your focus be?
Department by department, effective action. We agreed in the fourth quarter of last year with every significant department and agency on, I said, show me at least 3 big reforms, improvements, enhancements, and we will be marching to see that those are all accomplished by our last day of service. Everyone understands we expect to work hard and still be finding efficiencies and service improvements on our last day. So there'll be that. There's the day in, day out work of trying to find ways to conserve dollars, deliver services more efficiently. And we clearly want to turn over to whoever comes next a very solid situation that is AAA in every respect.
Have you seen the Witt Thomassetti report?
No, I'm very eager to, obviously, and but hire the best in the world. You can't tell them how to do what they do, but they know we're very eager to learn whatever they have to tell us, and hope that's very soon.
We talked about wanting to see the final language of a police entry bill support. Now that the General Assembly has passed it, will that be something you sign?
I just don't want to talk about it yet. I want to have a long look at it and see if anyone has anything to say that I haven't already heard.
Governor, could you back up for just a moment when you talked about going out last week and
How
seeing
far?
the impact of property tax impacts? Property tax impact. Where were you last week that you saw the positive impact of property tax?
Well, I don't want to name the county, but I'll just say I was in, this is not the first such experience. I was in a rural county and talking to a teacher who was concerned about their schools, and I pointed out that that county, very small, very low number of total students, is carved up in several school districts, and there was a lot, back to a familiar theme. This would be, by the way, a reasonable answer to the questions about what do you wish. I wish we'd gotten more dollars into the classroom in this state. We brought it up year after year after year. Progress has been fairly slow. We still consume so many dollars that could be paying teachers, paying for textbooks, all sorts of uses, if we didn't have so much redundant administration. So the person said, yes, there's a serious conversation going on for the first time about putting some of those administrations together.
Well, because you were in the tornado hit areas, so
Yeah, well, this wasn't one of those. This was not one of those.
On Rockport, why push for the tax credit and then with legislation and sort of the changing tax with the
Yeah,
session
well-
schedule up to the Department of Revenue?
Yeah, well, we didn't push for it, but, you know, it would have been fine with me if they'd clarified what's perfectly clear, which is that the legislature twice has voted that this tax credit should apply to this clean coal project. And this is about paying ourselves for energy. This is about finding clean ways, extremely clean ways, in this case, to use coal, putting people to work in Indiana, and securing a really good insurance policy in the form of some of our future natural gas at a very affordable price. So it's still a really good project, and I hope that we'll see it go forward.
You're saying your office didn't push for it?
No, I mean, when somebody else offered it up and they asked us, we said, fine. If it clarifies even more what was clearly intended all along. My understanding is that passing yet another clarification might have headed off legal obstruction. But if not, you know, maybe should still go forward.
Rockport is one of these projects where they're still in the running for this federal subsidy for loan guarantee. Should they get out now while they still can, taking a look at carbon letters?
I mean, it's two totally different programs, but I take your point that it's the same federal agency, I guess. No, that's for them to decide. You know, clearly, both Bright and Carbon present cases where people dealt in good faith with the federal government for years. You know, Carbon, if you read their letter, I mean, both the Carbon and Bright letters are worth reading as they go through the history of their dealing. But in the case of Carbon, the federal government even had loan compliance officers in and out of their facility, which is ordinarily it doesn't happen until they've signed a loan. They had every reason to believe this thing was going forward. Similarly for Bright, and so I don't know in the case of Rockport. That's for them to judge, but these recent experiences are cautionary. I agree.
Have you made up your mind on a replacement for Secretary of State yet?
I'm waiting on the Supreme Court. I've got, I think, a really good person in mind, but we don't know until the Supreme Court rules whether we'll be called on to make that choice.
When will you make your Supreme Court pick?
I think reasonably soon. I've been reading and rereading. I've been talking to a lot of people, listening to a lot of people, and it'll be well ahead of the deadline. I think the deadline's not till the third week of April, something like that, and I think we'll beat that, but with plenty of room to spare.
Following up Jules's question, how soon, if the Supreme Court rules that you can name Charlie White's successor, how soon after that decision will you appoint his successor?
I think pretty quickly. I'm very grateful to the interim choice over there, who's been doing a great job, and so there's not great urgency. The work I keep checking, and the work of the office apparently being done very professionally and very quickly. But no, I think this thing needs to come to an end, and so if the Supreme Court confirms, as we believe, that that that's the right way to fill the vacancy, we won't mess around.
Governor, the Court of Appeals today is hearing an emergency action where DCS is blocking South Tribune from running a story on DCS hotline calls that they received from a court. It's a pretty rare case of prior restraint. I wonder what you thought about that.
I haven't made a close study of it. These things are always difficult. Generally, we have a tendency, a bias toward openness, but there are laws and there are other interests involved, privacy interests. It's always hard to balance them. So I'm sure the court will pick the right balance in this case. All right, everybody. Thank you very much.